Putin's got a huge respect for the president. And, you saw what happened in the Oval Office with Zelensky and the president, right?
Yes.
Just like disrespecting him is not a healthy way to have a good relationship.
The arrogance of small countries, it's like, get some perspective. I mean, come on. How can you imagine acting like that?
And they're dependent on us.
I know.
And we've been so good to them.
I know.
In some ways, look, what do we expect? The fact of the matter is that Witkoff is not there as some kind of neutral arbitrator, a mediator. He's not there as some kind of expert in Ukrainian and Russian history. He's there to make a deal that Trump wants to happen. Remember, this is a guy who is a real estate lawyer. He is a deal maker. And part of that, the strategy is clearly to woo Putin to the negotiating table. They can, after all, sort of basically intimidate and force the Ukrainians there. But for the Russians, they're trying to use carrots instead of sticks. And I think part and parcel of that is exactly saying things that are exactly what the Russians want to hear. Doesn't necessarily mean that when we actually come to the negotiations, they are going to be quite so agreeable for the Russians. But I think that's the strategy, and we've seen it from Trump down. So basically, this is Witkoff not necessarily saying what he believes. I have no idea if he believes this nonsense, but more to the point, saying what he needs to say. This is how you also negotiate with Trump. You have to flatter him mercilessly if you want to be able to try and influence him. This is also what they're trying to do with Putin. This is the nature of the Trump administration. They don't really care. From their point of view, and look, they had this very almost 19th century view of the world, that basically there's a handful of countries that really matter, and everyone else essentially should accept that they're going to be told what to do. Now, we may well not accept this. And in fact, I think obviously the reality is, of course, that's not the way the world is these days. But from the Trump White House, they essentially think, look, Europe will just have to accept whatever happens. Ukraine will have to accept whatever deal they construct. As I say, I think there's going to be big problems down the line because Ukraine is not going to just simply roll over just simply because Trump says, here's the deal I've arranged with Putin. And given that the Americans are expecting the Europeans to handle whatever security guarantees need to be provided, and even Witkoff noted that there would have to be some kind of security guarantees. But, so obviously Europe will also have something to say. But at this point, we have still a White House that seems to think that it's some kind of imperial master that can just simply dictate matters, and everyone else just simply has to accept its view. A lot of what the Trump administration is saying absolutely echoes the Kremlin, and often the Kremlin's falsehoods about the fact that there were referendums in the various occupied territories, about the fact that sort of whole regions have been sort of legally annexed to Russia and so forth. All absolute nonsense. But it's not because they're just simply brainwashed by Kremlin propaganda or similar. It is because Trump has a certain affinity with Putin. Trump sees the world in similar terms to Putin. And from Trump's point of view, he just wants this war to be over, and so that he can hopefully, he thinks at least, get some kind of Nobel Peace Prize or the like. It is convenient for him to have his White House and thus therefore his various minions saying the same thing. So yes, at the moment, they are absolutely repeating a lot of Kremlin propaganda lines, but it's in some ways almost more dangerous than if they were just simply gullible fools who believed what the Russians were telling them. It's that, in fact, they have chosen to accept the same kind of nonsense because it suits their own interests. Well, what's really striking about these peace talks, where we have, after all, we have the Ukrainian and the Russian delegations in the same hotel, just on different floors, with the Americans to a degree sort of shuttling between them, is actually how the terms of these peace talks has over time shrunk. So now it's really just about some kind of a deal on the Black Sea, a sort of essentially a ceasefire on the Black Sea, which will allow both countries, both Ukraine and Russia, to be able to export particularly grain and similar agricultural products more freely via the Dardanelles. And is this a good thing? Yeah, absolutely. Might this be some very, very small step towards an eventual peace deal? Possibly. But the very fact that it's become so narrow and they haven't even been able to reach a quick agreement on anything this narrow, that also shows us just how difficult this is. And the fact of the matter is that Trump's early claims that, within a matter of a day, he'd have sorted out this conflict, are becoming increasingly painfully, obviously not true. So, yes, there is progress. These are technical delegations. These are, in other words, experts rather than just simply politicians in the main. But we're not seeing anything happening anytime soon. It seems to be that both sides are committed to stopping the long-range missile and drone attacks on the other side's energy infrastructure. And yet there have been attacks from both sides. The problem is that often it's very hard to know, is this deliberate or not? You know, if a drone smashes into an electricity substation in Odessa or Kiev, is it because it was targeted? Is it because it was jammed and just went off course? Often, actually, the damage is being done by something that has been shot down by air defenses, but obviously what went up has to come down, and it may well hit some sort of random location. All we can say at the moment is that there isn't a systematic attack on electrical and other sort of energy infrastructure targets, which suggests some tiny little willingness to continue to follow the letter of the agreements. But it absolutely doesn't stop all the other attacks. And in some ways, every drone that isn't firing at an electricity station can still be fired at a hospital, at a school, at a housing block, or whatever. So unfortunately, the war is equally bloody, even if there's just been some minor agreement about limiting some of the aspects of it. The very fact that, I mean, obviously, to a degree, Putin is talking to, well, the Americans and thus through them the Ukrainians, because he doesn't want to turn Trump down. He doesn't want to risk alienating Trump. But nonetheless, there are a few signs that at least he's willing to conceive of the possibility that there might be some kind of deal that can be struck. Again, this is classic Putin. He's not someone who has these long-term plans that he rigidly follows. He's an opportunist. He sees what are the opportunities today, which may well be different from the opportunities tomorrow, and he weighs his judgment. Certainly, I was talking the other day to a fairly senior American official who is not a great Trump fan, and he's certainly not a Putin fan. But he was saying that he's not willing to rule out the possibility that something may come of this. And that's very, very limited optimism. But nonetheless, it's about the most optimism we've had for 3 years.